Good morning, everyone. Fantastic. Good morning,
Good morning.
everyone. Welcome to today's Women in Residential Property webinar. Myself, we are coming from Collaborative Conveyancing. We are a technology company who assist in conveyancers and helping them with their inquiries. Presenting today alongside myself is Alison. Alison, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Alison Taylor. My background's a licensed conveyancer. I work on the product at Collaborative Conveyancing to use my background to kind of shape the product into what conveyancers want or need. That's my side.
And Jamie.
Hi everybody, I'm Jamie Shemwold. I was a conveyancer for many, many years, and now I am the head of customer success here at Collaborative.
Fantastic, thank you guys. We aim this webinar, you may have seen by the invite actually, to all sorts of people. So people new to the profession, estate agents, brokers, anyone else who is handling or dealing with conveyance and inquiries and would like to know more about them. We're going to take you through, as it says, the fundamentals. So there may be some bits that you already know, but we're going to try and take you from start to finish what conveyance and inquiries involves, and that sits with Alison and with Jamie. We'll cover today what are inquiries and what's their importance in the house buying and selling process. What are the differences between leasehold and freehold? I know this comes up a reasonable amount. What inquiries should be raised under the protocol? What does an inquiry timeline look like? Why does it take so long sometimes? And any questions. So I'm happy for you to put any questions in the chat as we go along. I think what I will do is answer them at the end, if that's okay. It's just if you think of them and you want to pop them in there, that's not a problem. There will be some time at the end just for some reflections, thoughts, questions, etc. Quickly, I think it would be useful for us to know who we have in the room. You don't have to say exactly who you are, where you're from, but just kind of any background to say kind of where you're coming at this from, what role do you have? I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that and then we'll get started. Thank you. Fantastic. Alison, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. So to start with, what are inquiries? What's their importance? So the principle of caveat emptor, or buyer beware, places the onus on a buyer to carry out investigations and satisfy themselves with the property and its condition before proceeding to exchange of contracts. Buyers' conveyancers are instructed to act on behalf of the buyer to carry out due diligence. So they review the legal documentation and advise their client and the lender on matters that might affect the decision on whether or not to proceed with the purchase. Inquiries can be raised on various things in relation to the property title, the search results, survey, and even the seller's responses to the property information form, fittings and contents form, and discrepancies in the paperwork. Once the investigations have been completed and the inquiries are satisfied, buyer's conveyancer has to submit a full report and advice on the property to the buyer before proceeding to exchange of contracts. So failure to raise the necessary inquiries or to advise the client properly could lead to a negligence claim against the firm. So most conveyancers tend to take a belt and braces approach to ensure all necessary inquiries have been raised and resolved before proceeding. So the timeline. After an offer is accepted, both conveyancers are instructed. Seller's conveyancer prepares and sends over the legal pack to the buyer's conveyancer. The buyer's conveyancer will raise inquiries on receipt of the legal pack. Sometimes they'll raise the inquiries as soon as the paperwork's received, and sometimes they'll raise them once they get the search and the survey results. So that varies from a conveyancer to conveyancer, and I think there's arguments for and against each approach. I've certainly done different styles of doing it in my past. The conveyancing process, part of the process, is only one step of the total conveyancing process, but it's arguably the most important and undoubtedly the most time-consuming. The number of inquiries continues to increase. In part, it's due to increasing complexity in conveyancing. So we've had the introduction of the Building Safety Act 2022 that's certainly raised more difficult things for the conveyancers to have to consider. And I think some conveyancers have actually steered away from working on properties that are affected by that, because there's been some there's not been an awful lot of guidance around that. And there's no standard way on how to raise or how to manage inquiries, so that can vary from conveyancer to conveyancer and even between individual conveyancers within the same firm. And to satisfy the inquiries, information is often required from multiple parties. The way it's dealt, one second. That can cause delays which are not within the control of the conveyancers. So you're tied into other companies' service level agreement times and waiting on various other parties. All inquiries must be raised and satisfied before we exchange contracts. After that point, the buyer is legally bound to proceed with the purchase, regardless of any matters that might come up after exchange. So it's imperative that the inquiry process is carried out correctly. So the next slide, Gemma. Yeah. So the inquiry, the conveyancing process. So this is basically taken from a textbook of the explanation of the conveyancing process from initial instruction to exchange of contracts. So only a very small part of this workflow refers to or relates to inquiries. So we've put those in bold there. So we've got the buyer's conveyancer will check the title and raise the inquiries. The seller's conveyancer will answer the inquiries. So basically, it's raise the questions and answer the questions. So that looks like inquiries are a really small step in the process, but in fact, it can be the lengthiest part of the transaction. There's been surveys carried out with various firms that found that the average time between inquiries being raised and inquiries being satisfied was, as of 2022, about 56 days. Back in 2007, the average timescale was only about 26 days. So clearly that timescale is getting longer, and the issue seems to be getting worse and not better. So there's the differences between leasehold and freehold inquiries. I've not gone into the difference between freehold and leasehold, but essentially there's in my opinion, the difference is the volume. So there's considerably more paperwork to read through, review, and report on a leasehold property than there is on a freehold property. So there's more complexity, there's more risk there. The volume of documents, we've just put a list of some of the example documents on here just to see. So on a freehold property, we have the contract, the title register and plan, and various other title documents. We've got the protocol forms, so property information, fittings and content, any planning documentation or guarantees and things like that the client's provided, your search results, and the relevant parts of a survey. On a leasehold property, you also have to read through the lease, the client's completed leasehold information form, the leasehold property inquiry form, which is a pack of information provided by a landlord or management company or managing agent. Sometimes there's two different packs to review, and there's lots of additional documents that are attached to those. So we've got service charge accounts. We need to check that there's a fire risk assessment and make sure any recommendations in that have been carried out. Asbestos report, and there may be other documents depending on what's in the wording of the lease, such as the deed of covenant, deed of variation. If we need to change anything in that lease, we need to check that buildings insurance is in place, etc., etc. So there's a lot more paperwork to have to review on a leasehold property. In addition, so an average lease is around about 40 pages long, sometimes more, sometimes less. The buyer's conveyancer has to read the whole lease in full and also use their knowledge and experience to review, to interpret what's in there. So just one unusually worded clause in a lease could have massive implications. And leases are granted for a very long period of time. So we could have 125 years or 999 years. And it may be that the wording in that lease could now be interpreted in a way that goes above and beyond what was originally intended. So as an example, there's lots of leases that will contain, and this could be for a house as well as a flat, that say a property can't be used as a business. meaning presumably originally that you can't, sell your wares from the property, for example, but that could now restrict them from using the property as an Airbnb, so which wasn't even a concept at the time that lease was drafted. A really common issue with leases is relating to the ground rent, and the fact that if the ground rent is over £250 a year or £1,000 a year in Greater London, the lease could be classed as an assured tenancy, and that could arguably put the lender's interest at risk. So decades ago, it would have been really uncommon for ground rents to exceed those figures, but now it's really common. And it's quite often that a lease will be varied during the process to either reduce the amount or to add extra wording in that will protect the lender's interest. So obviously that can cause a significant delay to the transaction time, because instead of just selling the property, you've got to amend the lease, which means contacting the landlord's solicitor, both conveyancers agreeing the wording of the document, getting it signed, etc. So on a leasehold property as well, seller's conveyancer may have to liaise with various parties. As I mentioned there, the landlord might collect the ground rent. The management company or a managing agent may deal with the day-to-day running of the building, collection of service charges. We may also need to contact a landlord solicitor to arrange a deed of covenant or a deed of variation. And the buyer's conveyancer is generally unable to correspond directly with these third parties. So the buyer's conveyancer raises the inquiries, passes them to the seller's conveyancer. They must then liaise with these various parties and pass the responses back to the buyer's conveyancer. So if they're not happy with those, we kind of go back and forth. So the seller's solicitors sat there as a middleman, passing the responses. So it can be really slow and time consuming. So the type of inquiries that should be raised under the protocol. So the conveyancing protocol is just a set of guidelines for the buyer's conveyancer and the seller's conveyancer to follow during the conveyancing process. So the protocol states that buyers should raise only specific inquiries required to clarify issues arising out of the documents submitted, or which are relevant to the title, existing or the planned use, nature or location of the property, or that the buyer has expressly requested. So that could be based on their own inspection of the property or the survey results. Standard inquiries that are not specific to the property should not be raised, nor should any inquiries seeking opinion rather than facts. So what the seller thinks. It could be things to do with, say, noise disturbance, where it may affect one person and not another. The inquiries shouldn't be raised about the general state and condition of the building unless it's something that the buyer has seen themselves or has come up in their survey. So sellers' conveyancers are not required to respond to inappropriate inquiries. In reality, that can be difficult because there's no clear-cut answer on what is appropriate or inappropriate. If it's something that the buyer thinks is important and they've instructed their conveyancer to pursue, then they are obligated to do so. So while the seller's conveyancers may be correct to refuse to answer non-protocol inquiries, we can often reach a stalemate if neither side is willing or able to back down. So one side will raise the inquiry, the other side will say, I'm not answering that because it's a not protocol inquiry, and we're stuck because if the buyer wants to know the answer to that question, their conveyancer is going to pursue that. So sometimes that can take quite a lot of backwards and forwards until we hit a point where everybody is happy to continue.
Thank you, Alison. I think we're going to come on to later as well, some of the reasons why this can take so long. I know you touched on them, but specifically dive into that because I know that's a big talking point. I think, Jamie, you're going to take over from here.
I am. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, hello everybody. So taking on from where we are now, we're going to look at why inquiries, what inquiries timeline looks like, and the reasons behind why inquiries take so long. So, as you can see from the actual state of play here and the diagram we've put on the screen, you can see a very, very basic kind of timeline of what we're expecting to see. And realistically, 99% of the time, we're going to see a transaction take longer than what this is. So you can see here at the moment that we've got next steps at August the 20th, but the actual original inquiries and contract packs were sent over on the 25th of June. Currently, as it stands at the moment, I would say that that's much longer than that. But as you can see, for reference for people who aren't solicitors, property lawyers in the group, I know that there's quite a few in there, so please bear with me, everybody. This is kind of not teaching you how to suck eggs, but everybody else in the room may not know the intricacies behind how it moves forward. So once we've sent the contract pack over, the buyer's solicitor will then obviously receive that, at which point they will start to have a look at all of the pack, raise their inquiries that they need, possibly even go to land reg. Some solicitors will go to the land reg instead of asking for certain things if it's quicker for them. It certainly was for me. And from there, they will start to raise their inquiries. Now, again, another sore point that we're seeing currently in the market, and we will see going forward in one of the next slides, is how inquiries are raised and how many are being raised from a study that's come out recently. So again, we'll go over that in more detail, but as it stands at the moment, they are getting more. At which point the seller's conveyancer can then receive those inquiries and deal from there. So usually what you will find is at that point, they will go out to third parties. If it's a leasehold, they will go out to the clients if it's certain things like fence certificates or building regulations. And again, another sore point around it is we will get replies back, unfortunately, saying, please rely on the local search, which sometimes isn't very helpful, especially if you can grab these certificates very quickly. But again, it also comes down to the fact that sometimes searches have not come back at this point. So therefore, if we can be a little bit more collaborative, sorry for being corny, everybody, please do. It's certainly something that used to frustrate me. If I didn't have a local search back, we can get things done a lot quicker. At which point we'll then go back and forwards with all of the third parties. So again, there is a specific mortgage broker in the group today that I used to work very closely with. She used to refer me work, so thank you very much, Kerry. It was very much so that we used to work as a team a little bit on that for the third parties, and she was very good at managing the expectation around third parties such as management companies. I'm sure the property lawyers, conveyancers and solicitors in this group will all vouch for me when I say they can be a pain in the backside. And some of them, and I won't name any because it's unfair, but there is some of them out there that do take a lot longer to come back to us when it comes to leasehold management packs that we need. The longest I've seen is 9 weeks. Some of them are really, really good and come back in a week. But again, 9 weeks for a management pack means that we can't move on that first line of inquiries and can't move on to at least second stage of inquiries where we're dealing with the nitty gritties. So the third parties section is quite difficult. Again, it might be around searches and search providers. We're waiting for searches to come in, and once they come in, we can raise inquiries off the back of those. Sometimes, and again, 99% of the time, they're not big inquiries that we have to raise, but unfortunately, sometimes you will get the odd failed local search from contaminated land, or again, you might have vested waters or water pipes, sewage pipes in the boundaries of the land. So we just need to make sure bits and pieces around them as well. So moving on from there, the seller will then continuously go around in this repeat circle of answering, raising, answering, raising, answering, raising, at which point, hopefully, we will come to a point where everything is satisfied. And as you can see there, once we've got to a position where we're satisfied, it could be a case of, is there anything more? So usually, and again, something that I would have done when I was a conveyancer is I would report to my client and then ask them, is there anything else you would like me to deal with? Is there anything else you would like to know? At which point, if they had any questions, I would fire them over. And again, usually they were smaller bits that we could deal with quite quickly, at which point we can move on to the next steps, which are talking about dates, exchange and completion. So why does it take so long? Well, from that point, you can see here, we've got studies from today's Conveyancers annual inquiry survey this year that 70% of the people that took part in this survey, and these are conveyancers, have said that inquiries have increased. And again, if there is any, I know there is some of you in here, guys, conveyancers, solicitors, property lawyers. If you do feel that that is something, by all means, pop it in the chat that you agree or disagree. It'd be quite nice to find out from this webinar if people are seeing the same. But 70% of conveyancers said to today's conveyancer that they did believe the inquiries were increasing. And out of those 70%, 56% of those said the relevance of inquiries had decreased. And what they're talking about there, for the people in the room that don't deal with inquiries, are personal, so the property specific inquiries. So the relevance around inquiries would usually be the standard inquiries, which are again nowadays not protocol, but it comes down to if it's relevant to that property. So let's say, for instance, and I have a perfect example of something that when I was at the Bold Legal conference last week, was I'd heard a conveyancer who I was sat having lunch with say that he had an inquiry for a second floor flat, asking about conservatory inquiries. Well, again, I'm sure that everybody in this room, no matter the profession you come out of, would know that there isn't going to be a conservatory attached to a second floor flat. So again, the relevance of these inquiries has also gone down whilst the increase has gone up. So therefore, we're having to deal with more and get rid of the wood from the trees to deal with the actual specific inquiries that are relevant to the properties. Again, a 10-year study has shown that the average caseloads of conveyancers has gone up by 79%. That is a huge number. And again, that will increase artificially slightly because of stamp duty holiday, COVID. And I'm sure that the conveyancers in this room will agree with me that that period of time was diabolical. And from there, between 2021 and 2023, we also see a 12.6% drop in the number of conveyancers. So again, this comes down to a lack of skills shortage now, and it's something, again, that we were speaking about quite heavily in the last few weeks. At the Bold conference, it was quite a prevalent thing, and also at a sort group forum that I was at. And they were saying, again, that there is a skills shortage. One person at a keynote actually used the words, you are a rare breed now of qualified conveyancers. That is worrying to hear people saying those kind of things. And the reason behind it, again, mostly is artificial because of the fact that stamp duty holiday and COVID did cause a big part of stress related anxiety for a lot of people. I will sit here and put my hands up. I certainly suffered with it. And again, Kerry in this forum today, she can also vouch for that. She's seen quite a lot of that. And then from there, we've got an increase in transaction times, something that, again, Alison did touch on, but the increase in transaction times is a big issue. And again, this comes down to the fact that there is a skills shortage in the sector. We've also got bigger caseloads, and we've also got more inquiries. And the problem is, and again, I can see someone's popped in the chat there about someone not actually checking contract packs. Again, yeah, it's a case by case basis, and I won't jump into that so much, but I can understand your frustration behind that. And again, that will cause a bigger impact when we're getting these standard inquiries and they're not property relevant. We then have to deal with those one by one and have to deal with what's relevant, what we're going to answer, what we're not going to answer. And again, if this comes down to certain conveyancers that maybe feel less confident because they've only been in the industry for maybe 2 or 3 years, and they've been thrust into a world of very, very high pace, and the word I used to use quite a lot was a baptism of fire. They are going and looking at kind of what they've been taught, and they're saying, right, well, I need that, when sometimes older, more confident conveyancers would say, actually, let's take a view on that. So again, that will cause bigger issues with the transaction times. Another point with the transaction times is around the management of those the expectations, and it's something that we're going to come on to shortly. But again, that is actually causing a bigger delay. The management of the actual expectations from a client from all parties is a little bit of an issue right now. So again, the final one, 2024, conveyancers typically manage around 200 cases, which is around about 1,000 inquiries at any one time. Now, again, 200 cases is a fairly high amount. The average is between 100 and 200. So usually you will find anywhere between someone running 80 files to someone running around 150. Certainly in the firms I've worked at, 80 to 150 was there or thereabouts, and that was managed based on a person by person case. And it was not that everybody had to deal with the same situation. You could have the choice around what you had. So we move on then to how people can help. And the first one is, again, going back to how can different parties help in a transaction? Well, you can see the two underneath, and management of expectations for me is the biggest one that I think everyone can help with, from the estate agent to brokers to conveyancers themselves. And again, from two studies that I've done recently, and one that I was sat listening to. So from a Landmark perspective, Landmark did a study between January 2023 and 24, and they went through Rightmove. And from start to finish, 95% of properties on Rightmove with leases, so leasehold properties, had either incorrect information or were down as a freehold property. So straight away, that gives the conveyancers an issue in two areas. One, the management of expectation in terms of how long the conveyancing transaction is going to take. There is a huge difference between freehold and leasehold right now. We're looking at somewhere between 12 to 15 weeks for a freehold property and anywhere between 18 to 22 weeks for a leasehold property. So very, very different. And again, that will how can somebody manage that if they don't know? So if they're getting the wrong information, they will firstly manage the expectation wrong, and secondly, they will probably quote wrong too. So again, nowadays with the Building Safety Act and many different regulations, leasehold fees have gone up. So especially when I was still working for the law firm that I worked for, leasehold fees went from 300 to 500, and then as I was leaving, it went up to 600 with £1,000 BSA fee. So £1,500 there or thereabouts for a Building Safety Act with a high-rise flat. So quite expensive. However, the reasons behind that was the risk that the actual firm was taking on Building Safety Acts and high-rise flats. So again, huge difference between high-rise flat and a leasehold house, of course. So that's where the disparity in the time comes, but there's still usually some kind of management pack of some kind that is needed. There is a lot more that goes into a high-rise flat than there is a house. However, it's still very much that they need the correct information. So Rightmove, from there, you can see out of 95% of properties, 60% of those were completely wrong and had the wrong tenure on them. So 95% of them had the wrong information, and 60% of those were completely wrong. So again, from an agent standpoint, it'd be really good for them to obviously help in that process of getting that information correct, or being very honest about it and saying, I don't know. You know, it's better to put you don't know and therefore let the conveyancer deal with it from there, instead of insinuating that it possibly is and it being wrong, because that causes frustration from a client's perspective straight away. Again, moving on to another study that I did personally between May and June of this year. We've got so on Rightmove, I went through 50 properties from most of the major cities in the UK, and overall 43 of those adverts on Rightmove stated that they could complete within 8 weeks. Now, again, from a study that was done by Sort Legal and the Sort Group, they estimated that conveyancers quote between 14 and 16 weeks, and 90% of transactions at this current time between January of this year and today's date have taken at least 20 to 22 weeks. And there's many reasons behind that. But again, if we've got people telling us that there is position with them saying they have conveyancers that can do it in 8 weeks, that will also cause a lot of problems, and it will cause frustration from a client perspective as well as the broker's perspective, because if the estate agents have said they know that they can get it done in 8 weeks, then you have a mortgage broker who then deals with the mortgage really, really quickly. At that point, you then have this disparity between 8 weeks and 22 weeks. That is double the time. And that is another problem that we've got currently, is we've got one set of people quoting one thing, another set of people quoting another, and the actual real figure. Now, coming on to the quoting of management expectations around weeks and times, this is a very touchy subject for conveyancers, because it was something that I asked them a lot of, and they said the reason that they can't actually say 22 weeks right now is because estate agents will just say, we'll go somewhere else and pass the work to other firms. They're worried that they will lose business at the moment because of that reason. So I think as a collective of an industry, we all need to come together to make sure that that isn't the case, and we're not trying to do the same. And a quote that was said by a law firm that I was sat talking to last Wednesday was, if we do go down the route of saying 20 to 22 weeks, they will pass the work to somebody else who will state 10 to 12 weeks, at which point it will still take them 22 weeks anyway, and we lose the business. So that is a problem. So again, what questions can you guys ask? So again, from a mortgage broker perspective, and again, I'm sorry, Kerry, to use you again, but it is easy to use you because you worked with me so closely. But the questions that Kerry always used to ask me were very, very good. She would ask me, what can she do to help? What can she get from the client? What can she get from an estate agent? And again, the same goes for estate agents and search providers, if they can help in any way, shape or form by saying, what can I grab? What searches do you need? From a search provider's perspective, can you maybe do a monitor of how long searches are coming in and send them out to the law firms to give them a nice overview of how long things are taking? That would be really, really handy, because especially from an area perspective, if you deal in a specific area, you would be able to let all of your clients in that area know and give them a genuine time scale of how long searches are taking. From an estate agent point of view, again, what can you get from? Can you go and get, if you know that the house has got a double story extension on the back that was done 3 years ago, can you get the fence certificates for the windows? Can you get the building regulations and the planning permission for that extension? Can you get that sent over to the estate agent with the memorandum of sale? To the conveyancer with the memorandum of sale, and say, here's all the documents that you're going to need. These little bits here that take no more time than what you've already invested in putting the market on the market, and actually making sure that we can move forward to proceed to sell that property on Rightmove, Zoopla, on the market, these places. Can you then go ahead and get those documents ready for when you're sending the memorandum of sale, to send all of those documents to the seller's solicitor? That again would speed up the process. It would also help. I know, again, I'm going to use Kerry as another reference. Kerry used to get me all of the ID and bank statements that I was going to need. We did work together for 4 years, so we got to grips with each other. We used to have a really good working relationship. The other thing we used to do was we used to have a meeting on a Wednesday, and why we would do that is I would have a meeting with Kerry on a Wednesday between 9 and 10, and I would go through updates for every single one of her clients, and then she would go to them with the update. And if there was any technical questions that needed to be dealt with, or I needed to speak to personally, I would say, I will speak to the client myself. I will give them a quick call. So that also helped because that distributed some of the updates and emails away from my inbox. So therefore I could deal with what mattered, which was what we all want is moving forward. And again, we just want, and I think everyone's in this room because they want to help clients move house. And that is the main be all and end all why we all got into this industry in the first place, was because we like seeing and helping people. And the biggest point from my side, and this is where I'm going to finish, is as a conveyancer, I think a lot of people think we're in it for the money. And I don't think that's fair, because that's not true. Most of us are in it because we really, really do want to help, and we want to see the smiles on people's faces when they move house. Or that was certainly my thing. And from any point, any third party, anybody in this industry that wants to help me help them, that was the best thing ever. And I think that's what we're trying to get over here, is just showing you a little bit more in depth around what a conveyancer's day-to-day looks like, in order for those questions to be asked. And hopefully we can bring that 20 weeks down to what we used to state, which was 8 to 12. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jamie, and to Alison as well. I think I can't see the chat. Apologies, Jamie. You probably can. I'll stop sharing my screen in a minute. Is there any questions that have come up? And if not, I'm going to put some out to the group, I would say.
Not as of yet, no. So thank you very much, Tika, for putting the issue in there about the generic inquiries. Again, it comes down to, I think, many different things. I think there is an aspect of what you've stated around people checking correctly. I think there is another aspect of time management. I do also think that there is aspects of newer conveyancers coming in that are a little bit nervous, and they want to just make sure that they're ticking every single box, because again, there's nothing worse than the things that we hear as conveyancers, especially when you're doing CQS and your bits and pieces, where every other thing is saying that you're going to be arrested and you can be sent to prison. And these kind of things that people are just looking to do a job, they do get worried by. And therefore it creates this problem of, actually, I'm going to ask everything physically possible in order to make sure that there's no grey area between what I've asked and what I've not. So that's my comments on it.
Thank you. It'd be good to know, and I suppose, apologies, this is probably this is a little bit longer for the chat, but has anyone had any positive experiences in their role or dealing with others in their role that have helped? Jamie talked about the different ways that we might be able to help, but has anyone, because there's obviously lots of things we could say that haven't, but has anyone had any positive experiences or things that you've done that you feel are helping this part of conveyancing inquiries, whether it be around managing expectations for your client, helping with the conveyancer, having that good relationship or communication? I think that might be quite nice to hear. Apologies, a long question, so it might take you a little while in the chat, but any positives that you've experienced or are doing currently that have helped in this process? I'm going to stop sharing and then I will be able to see the chat. Alison, have you had anything? Because I think that would help. Your conveyancer, anything that helped,
yeah, I was
or
just
you
going
feel would be
ramble
helpful?
for a second while people put stuff in the chat, because I think there's a couple of things because obviously we concentrate on inquiries, so we've seen lots of examples of inquiries, and I think it's quite clear from the sort of things that are raised that sometimes contract packs are maybe sent out by the seller's conveyancer. You know, they get the property information form in from their client, they get all the legal documents, they send the pack over, and then a lot of the inquiries are, you know, this answer was left blank by your client in the form, or your client stated that this document will follow. Where is it? So there's an awful lot of inquiries that could probably be resolved before the papers were sent out. So if we check the property information form, this is to follow, obtain those documents from your client before you send the pack over, it will reduce the number of inquiries that raise. And also a big one for me was on a leasehold property. We get the leasehold information form from the client, which has got contact details for the landlord and the management company. Sometimes the leave that blank, or they don't give you all of the relevant contact details. So to get the management pack, and sometimes there may be 2 packs that you need, you've got to contact those companies, ask how much money they want, get the money from your client, or arrange for your client to pay it before you can get those packs over. And I've certainly had it where the clients said, this company is dealing with everything. I've got the pack from them, got it back, and in that pack it said, oh, it's a different company that collects ground rent. So then I have to go and contact that company, find out how much money they want from the client, get the money from the client, request that pack. So that's the sort of thing that I mean, I don't know whether that could be collected earlier by the agents maybe, or certainly to make sure that the clients fill that bit in properly, because that can be it can be a delay even before, as Jamie said, it could be weeks and weeks to get those packs back from those companies. Yeah. But it could be 2 weeks that we lose just trying to find out who the right people are. So yeah. I think obtaining that information and having it available and making sure, you know, nothing's left blank. Let's get I think if we get the contract packs a bit more comprehensive as well, we reduce the number of inquiries, because they're not having to raise things that we can see in there. You know, it's almost like doing a mini title check as the seller's conveyancer to go, well, they're definitely going to raise this. Let's preempt it.
Just having a look in the, I think I could hear Alison okay, but I think you were cutting in and out, so let's just check she's okay. Someone popped in the chat, we need to work together. I understand that. I'm going to throw it back to Jamie, actually. Yeah. If you're a conveyancer, Jamie, what can you do to help me? And we did it all the other way around. What can we do to help you? And I felt it was a little bit one-sided. So what could you do potentially to help me? Because I'm a broker, an agent, other third parties in this, and I'm also under heavy workload potentially, and got my own stuff. Is there anything you can do as a conveyancer to help me along, and just same end goal, which I think is what people are popping in the chat?
Yeah, again, there's something that's just coming to the chat from Trish. Picking up the phone is the first thing. And again, I'm big for the phone, as you can tell. I don't shut up. I do love the sound of my own voice, unfortunately. So for me, picking up the phone and explaining what I was asking for, that's a big thing. I think the biggest thing from a conveyancer's standpoint, which they don't realize causes a lot of frustration, but does, and this is something that I've only seen since probably leaving being a conveyancer and moving into other aspects of the conveyancing world, is how replies to inquiries, or saying awaiting replies to inquiries, we're awaiting replies to inquiries, frustrates so many people, brokers and estate agents alike, because what they actually want when they say to a conveyancer, can I have an update of what's going on? They don't want to hear that they're awaiting replies to inquiries. What they're actually asking, and again, this is something that I would say, is they're actually asking, how many inquiries are actually left, and what are they? Are we able to help you? And again, to quote some of the brokers that I used, I'm going to leave Kerry alone now. But a lot of them did say to me, Jamie, if you can send me a list of what's outstanding, that'd be great. And someone's put in the chat about tables and inquiries and things like that. And that's a very, very easy one from a conveyancer standpoint to say, if you're sending it out to the estate, if you're sending out that to the other side and you're sending it to your client to say what's left outstanding, CC the broker and the estate agent in. You don't have to CC them into the other side's replies, but what you can certainly do is just send them what's outstanding and what you're chasing on. So then the client's updated. The one thing that I would say from a conveyancing standpoint is, and something that I noticed quite frequently, was clients don't speak to their brokers very well, and they don't speak to their estate agents very well, and they certainly do not adopt the update method. They do not update, they don't update them. So as much as you may have gone to a client and said, here's my update, here's my reports, everything else, the broker and the estate agent are in the dark. They don't know that that's happened. So something I used to do quite frequently was CC the broker in, CC the estate agent in, into like a little three-way communication between client, estate agent, broker, to keep them all updated. So then they knew exactly what was happening. At which point, if there was any problems, and again, I'm going to use Kerry here, we had a specific estate agent that was very, very good at going and getting us bits and pieces we needed. We were working with a firm that were very difficult to get anything out of. That estate agent was fantastic. And what they did was we'd give them the update. They would immediately CC me into an email saying, I've just tried to ring you. Here is all of the outstanding inquiries that Jamie's waiting for. Please can you get these over to him and CC me in it ASAP. That was like gold dust for me, because it was like, well, you've saved me another chase, and I can now crack on with the other files that I've got that you've also sold. So I want to help you help me. So I think from a conveyancer standpoint, if they can be as transparent, as open about the inquiry stage as they can, that can only help. Sorry, everyone, that was a really long-winded answer.
Alison, I know someone mentioned you were cutting in and out, but anything to add? I think, see if we've got better sound from you.
I'm not sure how much you heard, but yeah, I think for me, it's having that information, maybe preempting the inquiries, so we can knock them off, because the volume of them, and training, I guess, because as Jamie touched on, you know, it may be that people are a little bit more inexperienced, so they're raising things because they're scared not to. You know, they don't want to miss something. It's better be, as I mentioned, like belt and braces approach. You're better to raise too many inquiries almost than to not raise enough. But we've got to find a middle ground there where, you know, we're not just raising silly inquiries. I think we often use the example of the dead hamster buried in the back garden, that kind of thing. And you know, it's some things. I was trying to find some odd inquiries yesterday, and there's all kinds of strange things people request. But if even under the protocol, you know, if the buyer requests something, we're obligated to ask those questions. So again, maybe some of that could be dealt with by the agent. So arranging for, you know, boilers to be serviced, does it need to come through the conveyancers to you know, to pass that question on for us to say, can you contact the agent to arrange this? So, you know, there's probably some of it that maybe could be taken, you know, is it a legal point, or is it something that can be you know, dealt with by other parties? So maybe there may be some collaboration there.
Thank you. I think the final point is probably a whole nother topic in itself, so I won't go into it, is making the client aware from all point about it. The whole point of National Conveyancing Week actually is to make everyone aware of what conveyancing is, and I think sometimes that doesn't happen. Even myself as a consumer, I probably wasn't aware when I bought and sold houses. So for everyone to be transparent as much as you can with the client about what is happening, why, and what they can do to help as well, because I know that was mentioned as well in the chat, making the client aware. Any questions from anybody else before we leave you be?
I'd like to ask one, if that's all right.
Sure.
I'm from LMS, so but from a tech background, not from conveyancing. So I'm just here to learn more about inquiries from the conveyancing side. So I feel a bit of an imposter here with all of you guys. I'd be interested to hear whether people tend to push back on standard inquiries, or whether you feel like you just have to get on with it and it'd be faster just to answer them rather than push back.
Alison, go ahead.
Yeah, it's tricky, because I almost found the more experience I had, sometimes the more kind of you end up getting a bit argumentative and saying, you know, pushing back on, I'm not answering that. I don't need to.
I imagine it's frustrating.
Yeah, it is. And sometimes, you know, you feel like you're almost schooling somebody to say, this is the reason you don't need to ask this question. But sometimes, I certainly had a particular case, I think I've chatted to Jamie about this one, where, you know, I just had to give in the end, where it was something I knew that the other side didn't need. We went down this route. It caused a big delay in between exchange and completion, but well, it would have done if we'd have not given in, because they wouldn't back down. They didn't need it. I explained why they didn't need it. I used the law to explain why they didn't need it. But you know, you've got to go to your client ultimately and say, especially if it's something they need to pay for. You know, these are your options. I can argue it, but it might cause a delay. Or we can drop it and go with what they've said, but it's going to cost you some money. So, you know, iron out what's the best thing. So ultimately, I think you've got to have what's in your client's best interest. You know, it's as much as I'd rather push back sometimes and say, "Oh, you really don't need this. Is it worth, you know, if it's a indemnity policy for building regulations and the policy is going to cost 20 quid, is it worth me arguing that technically you don't need it?" You know, sometimes ask your client, so are they happy to pay 20 quid rather than me send a response to the other side, then take a few days until they get round to it, then them come back and say, "No, I insist on this," then me go back and say, "No, you don't need it." So I think it's just always got to be, you know, you've got to take your clients into consideration there and what's best for them. So it's tricky because there is a lot of questions, and there's a lot of them that come up over and over again. You know, it may be that you go back initially and say, "No, I'm not giving you that." When they insist, okay, is it quicker for me to just give them what they want? I think
someone's popped that in the chat as well. Sometimes it's just easier to answer it, but I think Alison touched on that to say what is in the client's best interest, and that's usually around speed. It might not always be, but I imagine if you're a client, you're interested in speed primarily.
To jump on the back of that, it very much, again, it is about case by case basis, because if you've got somebody that is just all about the speed, just deal with it. And from a personal standpoint, looking at this from a client's perspective, not so much a conveyancer's perspective, even though I was literally sat next to the guy that was buying my house for me. I had the problem of my house is freehold, but it has a chief rent, £2, and it's not been paid for from the entire ownership. It turns out that the guy who owned the chief rent actually is dead. The guy that was trying to, so at that point, without my conveyancer at the time, very, very good conveyancer, he put forward an indemnity policy. The indemnity policy was £180, and the seller said, "I'm not paying that, absolutely not paying that." I personally know the seller, so I know how tight he actually is, even though he has a very, very nice Ferrari. He does not like to spend any money, and he refused to pay the indemnity policy. He then tried to track down the chief rent holder, and I was like, whoa, Andy, don't do that. I will offer you, and I'm happy to do an allowance. £18, I was fine with it. He was fine with it. It was like, okay, we dealt with an £18 allowance, and that is how we dealt with it. But because I knew I could do that, it was easier. And I think on a case by case basis is where I would say it sits, because if you do have these people, Andy, my father-in-law's best friend, who we bought the house off, he had no real understanding of what the implications of what he was doing would have caused. And therefore, actually, by me knowing what to do in that situation, and most good conveyancers would, they would know to shut that down very quickly, because that will cause more problems.
Thank you, Jamie. We've got a couple of minutes. Any really urgent questions or things you want to ask? And if not, I'll leave you have 5 minutes back of your day and not run right up to the time. Really appreciate everyone attending today. Thank you. And thank you to Women in Residential Property for having us and letting us host this as well. Thank you, Alison, Jamie, for presenting. I will leave you all to your afternoon. I hope the weather is as good for everyone as it is here. We're also going to mention the weather, aren't we, if it's good in the UK. So thank you, everybody, and enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.